the great.
Okay,
stuff.
let's go on to our next clip.
Next video right here.
Next
Watch
clip,
this.
please.
Gum drop, you'll be getting a warning on your H2 tank.
Hey, Rusty, why don't you lean over here again? I'd sure like to get a picture of that whole scene. Okay, coming over.
Gum drop, you'll be getting a warning in about 4 minutes on your H2 tank. No sweat. Gum drop, this is Houston. You may be getting a warning on your H2 tank. No problem.
Okay, you ready for...
Okay, you ready?
Exercise. Thermal samples here.
Ready.
Second, Dave, let me get around here. I can get a picture too. Okay.
Gum drop, Houston.
All these marks all over the window. Shoot, oh dear.
Gum drop, Houston.
Hey, Dave. Okay. Are you ready for the scene? Hey, use your head when you're out there. You know, this isn't a contest between you and that sample. All right.
Gum drop, Houston. Anticipate a warning very soon on your H2 tank.
Okay, and you want to hook it in the solid ring, David, rather than that wire. Okay. No problem. Okay. There's one. It didn't even close on itself. Okay, now you got to pull those straight up, and there's one more little hook. Okay, now next one. Whoa! About that. That's a thermal sample. Yeah, you're getting it wrapped up around your neck. Okay. What if I got any film left? Oh yeah, I do. Take some more film going across Baja here.
Schweickart heart rate 77.
It's one place that's not too hard to recognize. Yeah, that's true. Let's switch hands with the camera.
Okay, we talked a little bit about the EVA a few minutes ago, but talk about the tether. Talk about that 77 heart rate, okay, while you're outside that capsule. I'm not sure I totally understand that part of it.
It was an instrument failure.
Well, that really gets personal.
No, with the backpack on my back, you know, I'm simulating. I'm using all the equipment that these guys, Dave and others, would use later on the moon to run around. An umbilical provides all of your life support, your communication, the cooling, and everything else. An umbilical provides everything. But I had everything on my back. So NASA headquarters wouldn't let us go just wearing the backpack, even though that would have been fine. They had to have the mental security of having a tether so that I wouldn't somehow mindlessly let go and drift away. So a tether is just a rope. And the interesting problem with a rope is that, you know, it tends to drift around and flop around and hook over things and that kind of thing, and weightlessness, just drifting all over the place. So actually, the tether adds to the danger instead of adding to the safety of flying out there. It's really interesting. But there was no way in the world we could convince NASA headquarters to go without a tether. So a lot of the work Jim had to do while I was EVA was to keep tension on the tether so that it wasn't just flopping around out there.
My life depended on not getting that tether hooked up with the radar.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, Rusty, stay away from that damn radar.
Yeah, everybody thought I was just going to flop around and break things and poke holes in my suit, but you know that wasn't in the game plan.
was the classical music, wasn't it? Yeah. So Dave, outside the command service module, what was it like? So when you went and experienced, we saw some of the clip there. What was it like?
Well, it's pretty spectacular. I mean, you get outside, and it's sort of like you can get out and stretch a little bit in that cramped little thing in there. The view is spectacular. And Rusty and I had about 45 minutes back and forth, and I'm watching him. And the whole idea is basically he's supposed to come across and get in the command module. Well, we didn't do that, but still, we had an opportunity to look, and I had an opportunity to put together a one-man EVA, so I could put a suit on without Jim or Rusty. And some of the guys, the engineering guys, came up with these ideas. And there's always some bright guy somewhere. So training on all this sort of thing, and the suit zips in the back. So how am I gonna, these two guys are in a limp, how am I gonna put a suit on and zip it up from the back? Some guy came up with the idea, you put a lanyard on it, on a piece of Velcro, and zip it up. So okay, that worked pretty good. Then we had this other problem, I'm supposed to align the platform so that the sun angles are right during the EVA, but we were behind the timeline, and I didn't have time to align the platform. So we talked down to MCC again and said, gee, we're not going to be pointed in the right direction for heating and cooling and taking the pictures. Some guy buried back in a back room somewhere, Gerry or Gene would know where, said, no, that's really easy. Take the sunspot that comes through the window and orient the spacecraft so the sun is shining on the lower left box in an LEB. So I moved the whole stack around that way until I got the sun spotted on a box in a LEB, which is not a very sophisticated way to align an inertial platform, but it worked. And those photos, the sun is in the right place. So there's always somebody somewhere who'll solve your problem.
You got a future in Hollywood.
And Jim, you're overseeing all this. You're the commander. How are they doing with all of these maneuvers? How was the assessment?
The main thing was Rusty, don't hurt the radar.
Noted. You got this image you just
Yes,
bouncing
sir.
off the, yeah, that's good.
Okay, let's go to the next clip.
Another clip.
With McDivitt and Schweickart in the lunar module, Scott alone in the command module, the two vehicles undocked. Looking more an abstraction than a machine, the lunar module danced an inverted pirouette before its lone partner in space. Firing its descent engine, the lunar module would pull away from the command module to a distance of about 100 miles.
Okay, I have us about 370 feet. Okay, looks closer than that. Doesn't it though?
How does that sports car handle, Jim?
Pretty nice.
In order to dock, McDivitt needed to use a sighting device on the lunar module docking window. However, the brilliance of the sunlight made using the sight difficult. Alone in the command module, Scott helped talk McDivitt in.
Well, you're coming fine. Just keep coming easy like that. It's going to go forward to your right a little bit, relative to your body. Well, it's translation, but I can't tell what my attitude is, Dave. If I don't see it, so there it is, there. Now you're coming in. Keep it coming. You're almost there. You're about there. I have captain. Really, Gerry. Okay, why don't you take a break for a while? Man, when I take a break, I'm going to bed for 3 days.
No country music in that clip either. Noticing that. Jim, how important was all this goal, this whole maneuver this was crucial, again, to get us to the moon landings and so forth. So,
Well,
and
Mark,
getting home, it's-
you're missing the point completely.
what's the point?
The point is, Rusty and I wanted to get back to the command module so we didn't burn up on the way in.
Well, that's implied.
Oh, okay, well, you know what, let me
So
say
that
something.
NASA doesn't get them, by the way.
Let me say something about that lunar module.
That's
You know,
a
it
deal.
always looks like it's such a nice, solid thing, and it really wasn't. The exterior is made out of mylar, which is like cellophane. It's held together by staples and Scotch tape. And the lunar module that Rusty and I were going to fly, LEM-2, is in the Smithsonian in Washington. If you don't believe me, go touch those things. It's so fragile you can't believe it. And when we went to the first stowage mock-up, we got in, NASA had a preliminary design review, critical design review, but we also had a stowage review to make sure that everything fit. So we went up to Bethpage and we get into the spacecraft. We got a couple hundred guys out there taking notes. The first thing happened is Rusty knocked something off, then Jim knocked something off, then something off. So I never got too excited on these things, but I was really getting a little irritated because we had all this debris laying there. And I finally said to the flight director, or the test director, there's a lot of people here for the storage review, and I think you could have gotten a hell of a lot better mock-up than this crap we're in. There's a long silence on the radio. And then he says, this isn't a mock-up, this is a Schweickart article. Then there was a longer silence while I said, oh. Yeah. Well, anyway, it was fun.
So, Dave, you want to interpret that? What was your view of all of that? That was the McDivitt analysis. Tell us more, the docking, the lunar module light, and then talk about the use of the telescope as well.
Well, again, it's the complexity of the Apollo system. And I think, again, back to the beauty of Apollo 9 was we got to try all of this stuff. And it's like, kids in a toy shop. We did all the simulations. You get up there and you get to do the real thing. And it's like flying a real airplane, which is another sort of point of our training. It wasn't just in simulators. We'd both flown a lot in airplanes, and you learn a lot by flying airplanes, especially in those days, because airplanes, many of them didn't work well, and that taught you how to take care of a problem. In fact, I'd like to bring up one little point here. Jim has a bunch of pals here tonight, a bunch of pilots, a bunch of really great pilots, as Jim was, okay, in the Korean and Vietnam War. And they wrote a really neat book. They get together once a week on Fridays. They call themselves the Friday Pilots. And they wrote a book called The Friday Pilots, and Jim's chapter is in there too. But it's a great bunch of guys, and a lot of them are here tonight. And they got us there, and they fought our war for us.
Yeah, why don't you guys stand up over there?
Stand up, stand up.
All right.
Good going.
I'd like, if Bob Barnett there, Bob, would you stand up, please? Bob Barnett, there you are, okay. Bob started this thing called the Friday Pilots. We used to call it the Lunch Up Bunch Group. But I want to point out to you that guy spent 1,989 days in captivity in Vietnam. Great guy.
Yeah.
Sit down, Bob. No, he's a great guy. and so are my other guys. We've got Army, Navy, Marine, and Air Force guys all chunked together. There's about 20 of us now. And we have guys dying off, and then the other guys join, and some of them don't last long. They get killed in a hurry or die or something. And then we get some more guys, read about it in the newspaper, and come over and join it. But it's a great group of guys, and I'm really proud to be part of it.
Okay, let's go to our next clip, please.
The prime recovery area had been shifted several hundred miles because of weather conditions in the original recovery zone. With the appropriate changes made to its flight path, Apollo 9 made its final descent into the atmosphere. The crew took these pictures of the re-entry and opening of the parachutes. The 10-day mission of Apollo 9 had met all its major goals. The ability to work and make a contingency transfer.
Okay, Jim, maybe you can lead this off, but all three contribute. You finally get down in the water, okay? You know, you've got the rafts around the capsule, and you got a lot of activity going on down there.
When I flew in Gemini 4, we missed the carrier by about 40 miles because we didn't have a computer. But on Apollo 9, we came down right next to the carrier. It was beautiful. You look out there and see the flags flying, the C-130s going by, the scuba divers jumping in the water, the helicopter all rail. It was really a beautiful sight. But my motto was space flight's not over until you're on the carrier. And so, it's a good motto. Yeah, and so when they had developed a new system in the Navy called a Billy Pew net. It was an aluminum framework with a lot of netting, and it didn't get in that old horse collar where you could fall out. It just rolled in. So the squadron commander found out that because we were so close, they were going to have live TV for this. So he wanted to be a movie star. So he had not practiced, and so he decided he would do the recovery. So he came by with the net. And of course, the command module is shaped like a like a top. And so when the downwash would get on it, it would move. And then he'd get on it and it would move. So he chased Rusty around with the rest of us looking at it for quite a while. And then he finally came by and got him in. And then they came by to get David. One of these got dunked in the water, I don't remember which one. And they cranked Dave up so fast, he bumped his head on the bottom of the helicopter. And so he almost lost. Then he came back to get me. And so, and at the same time he's doing this, we got 2 life rafts. And over in one life raft was this Navy scuba guy changing the film on his camera. And so he wasn't looking at this net. And it came by and whacked him in the back of the head, knocked him out. He fell over backwards into the water. his head was underwater, and I'm standing there with the other scuba guys hollering. Of course, they can't hear me because we're in the downwash of the helicopter. So I finally had to run over to the other life raft and try to pull this guy out. I couldn't get him by myself. So the other guys came over and helped me get him out. And so we almost lost the scuba guy there. And that night when I saw him, I asked him what he was. He said he had a hell of a headache, but thanks for pulling him out. But what really should have happened and did happen is that when that helicopter pilot landed on the deck, the Chief of Naval Operations had been watching this fiasco in Washington on a television, and the guy was fired right then. So we had a new squadron commander that night. But anyway, the mission is never over until you're on the carrier.
Good call. Should we bring up like the rest of the story now, Jim? Because there's this story, and then there's what's going on the ground, and the mission control guys. I mean, kind of a big deal, kind of all part of the whole thing. And we are blessed tonight to have not just anybody tonight, but to have Gerry Griffin and Gene Kranz with us tonight. You know, Paul Harvey used to say the rest of the story. As they're ambling up here, let me give you a little bit of background here. Gerry Griffin, aeronautical engineer, former NASA official who served as flight director during Apollo, during the program, and director of Johnson Space Center, succeeding the legendary Chris Kraft, who's still out there in his 90s, just phenomenal. Former flight and weapons system officer in the U.S. Air Force, began his space career as an engineer flight controller at the U.S. Air Force Satellite Test Center, mission control flight director for all the Apollo program manned missions, including all 9 manned missions to the moon, 6 of which included lunar landings. Gerry's Gold team conducted half of the lunar landings made during Apollo on 14, 16, and 17. His team played a key role in the safe return of the astronauts on Apollo 13, and former director of the Johnson Space Center. Gene Kranz, known by many Americans, is the guy with all the vests. Does he wear a vest tonight? No. Doesn't wear. Out of all the bunch, didn't wear a vest tonight. He'll explain why. American aerospace engineer, retired Air Force fighter pilot, retired NASA flight director and manager. Gene Kranz served as the second chief flight director, succeeding NASA's founding flight director, Chris Kraft, during Gemini and Apollo. Best known for his role in directing successful mission control team efforts to save the crew of Apollo 13. And so many know that movie. Well, that's a whole rest of a story kind of thing for another night. We may touch on it. He was flight director during the first lunar landing of Apollo 11. Buzz, you may remember that well. I know you do. He's noted for his trademark close flat top hairstyle, which is the best toupee I've ever seen. Fantastic toupee. And you realize his lovely wife, Marta, made all those vests. All the vests, his wife made those. Different styles and materials available in our gift shop, right, Sandy, when we're finished? Actually, that's probably a good idea. Gene Kranz, the embodiment of NASA's rough and tough and competent, the tough and competent of the Kranz dictum. Gene Kranz, Gerry Griffin with us here tonight. Great to have you here, gentlemen. And we could go on for a long time, but we only rented these couches so long, right, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. Where would you like to go now that we have, you realize what a rare thing this is right now? That we can applaud just what this is, okay?
So we'll start off with Gerry. Okay, you look at Apollo 9. You two participated in a lot of the missions, as you know. How did this fit into the puzzle? How important was it really?
Well,
and you both can answer.
Yeah, as this bunch over here, kind of, rowdy bunch over here, said earlier, everything was built to take one step after the other. 8 was a little kind of out of place because we didn't have a lunar module, and besides that, we wanted to go to the moon in a hurry, so we did. But starting with 9 we've really got into what I think is the meat of getting to the moon to land. And I can remember the thinking about, for the first time, we were going to separate these guys, two of these guys, without a heat shield. And it was kind of a gulp moment. I can remember, well, now we've done it, and we got to get them back. But that step was later repeated in the other missions a lot. But 9 set the stage to do that. Rusty's work with the backpack. So everything, I think, from 9 on was kind of, it was a critical, super critical line that had, each step had to work or we'd have been stopped.
Yeah. We missed the goal.
We missed the goal, very likely. And I don't know, Gene, did you?
Well, I got a confession to Jim and the entire crew. You know, I was division chief of flight control, but I didn't tell them that the team that I was assigning for their mission had never flown a manned mission before. These were the guys who did all the Agena work. And this was the first mission that they ever flew with the crew on board. They had the work on the Apollo 5 mission, where basically we flew that sucker from the ground and managed to satisfy all the objectives. So this was a good team to break in. And it was, I think the lunar module was probably my favorite of the spacecraft, because it was the device. The others, the command module was transportation. The lunar module was the business end that was going to carry the men to the moon and return them back up to the spacecraft. Basically, Jim mentioned a lot of things about the simulations. One of the things we got out of the simulation that was very important to 13 was the sim soups would always leave us the lunar module dead in the water, and we'd have to do a command module rescue there. And therefore we had to develop power down procedures to basically, because the command module rescue would take basically a day, if I remember right there. So that was a big piece there. The other one that was very important for the later missions is that this is the first mission we had where we had 2 spacecraft with all the communications between the crews. We had 2 teams now in mission control, but we had a single 1 or 2 controllers trying to handle all the communications. This is where those guys, you remember the encode that we had in there, remember the problems we had on docking. It took about a half-hour communications before we could finally get set up to accomplish that. The system was misconfigured. And so that was a big breakthrough. But I think the key thing is that the young people that basically moved over were the Agena teams we had during the Gemini program. And they'd never flown the mission before, and it was really great to see them perform during the Apollo 9 mission. Big breakthrough.
Did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of think about it. Actually, we did a lot of new things with spacecraft, but it was a new scene in mission control, because we had all of a sudden a different set of variables to work with. So it was, 9 was big. It was huge.
It was big, and to touch a little bit on what we talked about earlier here, after the Apollo 1 fire, January 67, and then leapfrogging to the next manned event, which is Apollo 7, and Wally and Walt Cunningham, Don Isley, and then 8. I mean, the audacity of all of that, but 9 fitting into the puzzle, if you will, leading up toward Apollo 11, the subsequent landings. Talk a little bit about your perspective, both of you, on that, how important that was, because this was big, but every one of those missions was big, right?
The way I think of it is 9 enabled 10, Tom Stafford mission, and then 10 enabled 11. We had to have every one of those work as advertised to go to the moon on 11.
Yeah, the real challenge for me was that we had to bring new flight directors in throughout that entire period of time, because after the Apollo 1 fire, Kraft and Hodge left the program, so basically I was left with myself and Lunny. Cliff Charlesworth stayed there for a while, but we had to bring in Gerry and Pete Frank And as we finished the program, we brought in the flight directors we need for the Soyuz and the Skylab programs. So it was really a question of continuing to grow the teams and the people and figure out which one of these controllers from the earlier mission would be a good flight director for the later missions we had. The people, I always say it's easier to build a spacecraft than build a team. And that was, I think, the challenge that we had.
Oh, I don't know. I built a lot of those spacecraft and they weren't so damn easy, James.